how's it going? Welcome back, or welcome to the RKH podcast. My name is Rami, the RKH, your host for this podcast, and we are going to be diving into today's episode regarding narcissism. I'm currently doing a narcissism series, and we are talking all about the different stages and levels of what you can see in narcissistic relationships, but keep in mind this also applies to general toxic relationships. So, a disclaimer, this episode is not meant to basically diagnose anybody with narcissism, okay? Narcissism is a psychological, psychiatric diagnosis, and you would have to go to your psychiatrist, etc., to get a diagnosis, but that doesn't mean that you won't see these traits in unhealthy relationships. So we are here to dive in to this week's episode, which is all about boundary violations, all right? Oh man, boundary violations is a huge one when it comes to psychological and emotional abuse. We've all heard the term boundaries, right? So what are boundaries? Boundaries are perhaps, let's say, healthy expectations that you have in any style of relationship, whether that's friendship, family, romantic, that keeps you in more, I don't want to say in a safe space, but if you have a certain boundary, and that's a valid boundary, there's a trigger there, there's trauma there, or you just have a preference, a lot of people are going to respect that boundary, especially those that respect you. When it comes to close, intimate partnership, it's really hard to address and assess boundaries because you want your partner to feel seen. You want your partner... Yeah, my throat. See, like it's hard to speak up for yourself and what you want in your boundaries. It always activates people's throat chakra when I'm speaking about that. So like, how could I say that? I'm needy, I have all these expectations. But a true loving partner or parent or friend, family member will respect the boundary that you put into place, or you're going to need to assert your boundary by only being in situations where that boundary is upheld. So there's a fine line, okay, between having a healthy expectation with the boundary and being needy. So a healthy, let's say, what's a boundary and what's a value, right? So I'll give you an example. You saying to your partner, you're never allowed to go out, that's a boundary. That's not a boundary, that's controlling, right? If your partner's value is, I want to be able to go out all the time, they're not going to be in alignment with your partner. You're not going to be in a healthy relationship, most likely, if this person's wanting to be out without you all the time. A boundary or a healthy expectation in that situation could be, hey, you guys talk about what's the middle ground. How many times do you want to go out? How many times do they go out? How many times do you, like, how long do you spend together? What are your expectations of what you spend together? Like, that's healthy. If you see that, hey, we're on complete opposite sides of what we want, then neither of you should change that. The more you try to change that, the more unhappy you will be. It could be with drugs and alcohol. You could say, hey, this is a boundary for me. Like, I'm not okay with someone that excessively drinks. I'm not okay with someone that does drugs. I'm not okay with someone that smokes. That's a healthy boundary to have. If this individual is like, oh yeah, I don't do any of that, but they're lying to you, that's a boundary violation. If they start doing it in front of you, they've gone back on who they told you they were. So those are important things to keep in mind. But for you, it's accountability. Because if this agreed upon boundary is violated, how do you act? Are you staying in the situation and continuously allowing someone to cross your boundary? Or are you asserting your boundary and saying, I'm getting the F out of here? That's the difficult part, because when you end up becoming intimately or closely involved, or when it's a parent that you have this maybe trigger or trauma with, you're going to want them to change. You're going to expect them to change. You're going to want them to do everything to ensure that your boundary is not crossed. But only a person that has accountability and awareness and empathy in that situation is going to do that. It's on you to ensure that you are respected. A lot of people don't want to hear that. Of course, you're going to want to be in a relationship with where someone respects you. That's common sense, common knowledge. Of course you'd want that. But in these styles of relationships, more specifically romantic, A toxic partner is going to purposely cross your boundaries, is going to purposely do things that annoy you to keep you on edge because they can control you that way. If you're tired and you're exhausted and you're feeling unheard, they want to chip away at you to ensure that when they cross your boundary, it's not that big of a deal. So they can continue to go back on their promise. The way this showed up for me was with smoking weed or not coming home on time after work, purposely staying at work later till 11, 12, 1 a.m. To annoy me. And I'm not ashamed to say I stayed for a lot longer than I should have. It was a big learning lesson, and now I get to teach you guys. But that was used against me, and that means that I would be upset. That means that I wouldn't eat then because I'd be upset, and that means that all of my efforts for the evening would have gone to waste. Because I valued having that family time in the evening. I valued having dinner together as a partnership. Another one was smoking weed. One of my boundaries was, I'm not going to ever tell you you need to quit, but if it's something that's excessive, this is not going to work. And I was told this is going to work. This is fine. I won't do it around you. Continuously was done around me. Continuously was used as a threat. Continuously was used as a way to chip away at me and my confidence. So people will purposely do these things to keep you hanging on a thread, to say, hey, you haven't obeyed me, therefore I'm going to go and do these things that upset you. Hey, you're being too demanding, therefore I'm going to go and do this or that. So because you may not have the best self-esteem in that moment, because you may be feeling scared, because you're like, yeah, let's work the rough patch, you may stay. So the question is, how often is this happening? Because those violations of your boundaries, those healthy expectations, those problems grow. They don't become smaller necessarily, unless all parties, especially the one that's violating the boundaries, is helping the scenario and taking accountability. For you, you don't use your absence as a threat. Your presence is a reward. And a lot of people forget that. If you're doing everything right, if you're healthy, if you're empathetic, if you're holding up your end of the bargain, your presence is an award. It is not a guarantee. A reward, sorry. It's not a guarantee. That's where a lot of people get mixed up. I've been there. Because when you're so deeply immersed and immersed in something, and that is the energy you're swimming in all the time, you're, no offense, you're a weaker version of yourself. You just are. But that is the goal of the narcissist. That is the goal of the toxic individual, is to make you a percent of yourself. The goal is not for you to be lively and vibrant for them. They will make you feel that way at the beginning by love bombing you. They will make you feel that way by making you, feel that you're the only person in the world. And then when things start to shift, you become confused because they've essentially filled your cup up so much that a little spill here or there is not a big deal. And eventually it becomes bigger and bigger. The spill becomes more. And then you realize, oh, now I'm an empty cup. So filling that cup up is a lot harder, because every time you gain some self-esteem, every time you gain respect, every time you assert your boundary, this individual will come at you in some sort of way. Through all of the techniques that I talked about in previous episodes: isolation, lack of empathy, manipulation. They will look at your vulnerable spot, or they will uphold your boundary for a short while to regain your trust. So you start to see hope. And in these moments, it's difficult to recognize the pattern. It's difficult to recognize what's progress versus what's the pattern. So that's something that I want you to keep in mind. The main takeaway for today's episode is it is your duty to assert the boundary. Because a lot of people are scared to walk away from something they've committed to. They're scared for it to be public. They're scared to be looked at as a failure. Of course you're going to be scared. But the question becomes, how miserable do you want to be in life? Do you want to continue living in this question mark energy? Do you want to continue maybe being respected for the rest of your life? Or do you want to know with certainty that, I can do better once I walk away from this. I can do better once I know I'm loved and respected. That's a huge question to ask yourself. What side do I want to be on? Do I want to get through this and heal and be happy? Or do I want to stay and be miserable and not have any control over my life? So it's difficult to ask yourself those questions, but those are the necessary ones that you need to go through. Do I want to stay and be miserable, or do I want to leave and be happy? And maybe that leaving is temporary. Maybe that leaving is, hey, I'm asserting my boundary and I need to see what I want in my life. There's always room for growth. There's always room for healing. There's always room for someone to take accountability. We're not saying that there isn't. I've seen that in my life. I've seen that with people I know. But you get to determine where you put your energy. So you don't stay in the situations where your boundaries are being violated. But also you don't create a pattern of going back and leaving, going back and leaving, going back and leaving. A lot of people want to say, hey, I need this to be perfect. I need that to be done. I need this to be done. I need that to be done. There is never going to be a perfect situation or scenario. It's not possible. What is possible is your ability to grow and heal. What is possible is your ability to challenge your own belief system, to challenge your own self-worth. Right? Because if you look in the mirror and you're like, these are all the things I hate, how did I let it get here? You're the only one that's going to correct that, because the person on the other side benefits from your lack of boundaries. People benefit from your lack of boundaries, whether it's a parent, friend, family member, or partner. They benefit from you not having boundaries, because that means that they don't have to change. That means that they don't have to be accountable. That means that you are enabling them. It's simple. Why wouldn't someone want to have less responsibility to pick up slack in their life? Like, nobody wants to really, honestly, uphold their end of the bargain all the time. That's just a 3D human thing. But your value, your future, your path and trajectory is dependent on what you decide to do in these moments. Because deciding to be in a partnership is difficult. Deciding to maintain a relationship with your parents may be difficult for some of you. Don't make it harder. Don't make it harder. Because you deserve to be loved to the fullest extent. You deserve to be respected to the fullest extent. And a lot of people that are empathetic fall into these scenarios and then kind of lose themselves in it. Lose themselves in the experience, lose themselves in these toxic patterns, lose themselves in toxic relationships, lose themselves in just accepting less than out of the fear of not having anything. And that's not you. That is not you. So I want you to reflect on where in your life have you allowed your boundaries to be crossed in any style of relationship? Did you overstay your welcome? Was your inner child unhappy? Were you happy? Did you see growth or did you not? Where can you learn from your experiences at this specific point in time? All right. If you want to do coaching with me, I'd absolutely love to help you through any of these scenarios. You can book a call via the link in my bio. Make sure you're following along. I'd absolutely love if you gave me a review as well. It helps me reach more individuals like you that are looking for support in these areas. And I'll catch you guys on the next episode of the RKH podcast. See ya.